Hey, WIDGENS is a technology to interact with computers more naturally by rendering anything that we want on our screen. There's no better way to understand this than seeing it in action. So we'll start with the basics and then we'll showcase some of the new use cases that this new technology offers. The one thing to remember in WIDGENS is that we always talk to windows. A window is a selectable section on your screen that you can interact with. You can talk to a window and it will always respond visually with a widget or another window. And when we start a new dashboard, we always have a single window. So let's actually use this window to start showcasing some examples. For example, I can ask, hey, can you show me an image of a giant gorilla next to the Eiffel Tower? And notice that I just submitted the prompt and Widgets is thinking about what to render inside. And in just a few moments, we have our answer, which in this case is an image. But I can generate many more things. For example, I can ask, hey, show me a video of the Eiffel Tower at night. And same thing, I just submitted the prompt, and in just a few moments, I have my response, which in this case is a YouTube video that we could watch. Or I can ask for, hey, can you show me the weather in Paris? And same thing, the window is processing the request, and in just a few moments, in this case, I have the weather widget. Or I can simply ask, hey, can you show me how high is the Eiffel Tower? And in this case, it's going to reply with some text, which is what makes more sense. And so far, we've seen that a window can render a single widget inside, but a window can also render another window that has much more content, which is when it gets really fun. Because, for example, instead of generating a single image, I can ask, can you make a list of images of random fruits wearing sunglasses? And even though my prompt doesn't make a lot of sense, what we get as a response is actually what we would expect, which is a list of images. And we're not limited to images. We can render lists of literally anything else. So just to show a few examples, I can ask, show me some movies by Christopher Nolan. And it already understands that I want the list, and it shows me a list of movies. Or in a similar fashion, I can ask, show me some songs by La Rosalia. And again, we get a list, which in this case is a list of songs. And we can also reproduce these songs in our browser. So this can literally become our playlist. And just to show a few more examples, maybe we can ask, can you show me some vegetarian restaurants in San Francisco? And again, it understands that I want a list because I didn't ask for a single one, but I asked for many. And this is what I get. And in this case, we have restaurants, but we could also ask for theaters or swimming pools or any other location. And maybe just a final example would be to ask for text. For example, I can ask, can you make a list of 8 different animals? And we're also going to get a list because this is what we asked. But in this case, it's just a list of different texts. And let's actually use this example to understand what's going on under the hood. Basically, every time that I was asking the general window for a list, instead of rendering a single widget, it rendered another window. And we know this is a window because we can select it. So it also means that we could prompt this window. And as you notice, this is a different kind of window just because it has a different icon here. So that's how we know the type of windows. There are different types, and we'll check all of them later. But for now, we'll just stick to the general windows, which has this dashed box. So again, the general windows rendered another window, which is a list window. And the list window rendered a few other windows, which are also of type general because of the icon here. And what's really cool about widgets is that, as we said in the beginning, we always talk to windows. So I can select any window on my screen and I can interact with it. For example, I can ask, can you show me a photorealistic image? And I just submitted the prompt to the window. And notice that in this case, I didn't need to specify that I wanted a lion because when a window is titled, and we can, of course, also change the title, the prompt is always sent in reference to the title. So we don't need to specify what we want inside. And this is very useful because this allows us to select not a single window, but if we press the Shift key, we can select many windows at a time. Or actually, we can select the parent window and then pressing the down arrow, we can select all of the windows. And because every window has a different title, we can submit the same prompt to every window, and the response that we get for every window will be different. So, for example, I can ask, can you make an image of this animal riding a motorbike? And in this case, I submitted the same prompt to every single window. And because every window has a different title, I get different images for every window. And this technique is what we're calling parallel prompting, because we send the same prompt in parallel to every single window. And this opens a new browsing experience because since we're talking to windows and windows are very general, they can render almost anything, we can use this to get a lot of different information. So for example, instead of image, I can ask, show me a National Geographic video of this animal. And the same thing, I just submitted a prompt in parallel to every single window. And in just a few moments, we get the response back. Or I can use this to learn. For example, I can ask, can you tell me in a short answer whether this is a mammal or not? And in the same fashion, we just get very fast responses for every single window. Or another example would be, can you tell me in a short answer what is the name in Latin of this animal? And again, we just get a very quick response. Or maybe a final example would be just asking for a GIF. And then when I submit the prompt, then we get what we expect as a response, which in this case is quite funny. And as you see, we can use this to learn about a lot of topics in parallel, which is super useful. But we can also use parallel prompting, not to learn, but actually to generate a lot of content. So for example, I could select 4 windows in this case. And because we can generate other windows inside, let's actually ask for lists of, in this case, images. I can ask, hey, can you make a list of different images of this animal wearing different clothes? It's probably not the best prompt that I could have asked, but hopefully the response makes sense. And every time that it starts being a bit too tricky to visualize what's inside the window, we can press the right arrow to zoom in. And then we can also press the left arrow to zoom out. And once we're zoomed in, we can use the arrows on the screen to navigate to the siblings. So here we have the images for the lion, but we can also check the elephant, the giraffe, which is quite fun, and the kangaroo. So that's how we can very quickly use parallel prompting to generate a lot of content. And in this case, we have lists of images, but again, because windows are very general and they can render anything, we can render a lot of things that could be useful for our use cases. And every time that we want to turn a window into its own dashboard, we can go to the window menu and click this button. And dashboards are useful in WIDGENS because they allow us to organize information and to access it more quickly. So I can save a dashboard and then I can come back another day and very quickly access it and start editing or using it as inspiration to create other dashboards or share it with a friend or more things that we'll check out later. And now that we have this list as a dashboard, let's actually start learning about the list window. Because so far we've been talking to general windows, which are very useful when we want to display general information because they can generate many more things. But sometimes we just want to edit what's currently in a list. And that's what list windows are useful for. So for example, I can remove the current items on the screen that I don't like, but I can also prompt a list to generate more items, regardless of what kind of widgets we have inside. So in this case, we have images. So for example, I can ask, hey, can you add a few more clothing items, maybe eyeglasses, some pants, and sneakers? And when I submit a prompt, the list always looks at what are the current elements inside. And the new elements that are added are always coherent to what's currently in the list. So in this case, because I had images of giraffes wearing clothing items, the new items were in reference to what was previously in the list. Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about the next window, which is the chat. The chat is like a general window in the sense that it can respond with any widget or any other window, with the difference that a chat is conversational. So a chat will always remember every prompt that you submitted and every response that you got back because it keeps a history of all of the messages. So for example, I can ask, hey, can you show me a laptop that I could buy? And the prompt will show up on the right and the response will always show up on the left. And what's cool about the chat is that, of course, you can ask follow-ups. So you can ask, can you show me a list? And you don't need to specify that you want laptops because, of course, it remembers. And here you have the response and you can keep asking follow-ups. So we can ask, can you show me only the gaming ones? And again, we don't need to specify that we want laptops or that we want lists because it also remembers that. And what's cool about WIDGENS is that we always have windows in our screen and any window is promptable, right? So I can select the list and then ask for more items, or I can select a few of these, like for example, this one, and maybe this one. And then if I want to learn more about them, for example, I could ask for a video review. And this is how I use WIDGENS to browse, right? You can very quickly generate content and learn about this content and keep iterating. And as I said before, this opens a new browsing experience where you can learn about a lot of things very quickly. And this brings us to the next window type, which is the document. The document, if you've ever used a block-based editor, it should be pretty familiar because we can use a command here to instantiate bullet lists or tables, images, videos, a lot of different things. But what's cool about documents in WIDGENS is that it uses WIDGENS capabilities to create widgets and windows. So for example, I can rename this document to a quiche recipe. And then I can ask, for example, for an image of a quiche, then a video of quiche recipe, and finally text for a quiche recipe. And I can turn any paragraph into a widget or a window just by clicking this button. So I'm doing that for the text, and now I'm doing that for the video, and I'm doing that for the image now. And in just a few seconds, I can craft my own document, which is very useful. And we can also talk to the document, of course, because the document is a window, and in WIDGENS, we always talk to windows. And we can ask it to do other things, right? For example, I can ask, can you add another image of a chef holding that dish? And it understands what is the current content of the document, and it tries to add more information that's relevant. And in here, we're rendering widgets, but of course, we can also render windows. So for example, I can ask for a list of quiche ingredients. And the document will create a list window inside the document. And of course, we can, for example, parallel prompt and ask for an image. And in this way, whenever I go do my groceries, I have a more visual information of what it is that I need to buy. And something useful to remember is that since general windows can render any window inside, they can also render document windows, which is very useful, especially for parallel prompting. So just to showcase an example, I can ask for, can you name 4 different famous singers? And then let's wait for the list to be finished. And now I can parallel prompt and I can ask for, make a document of this artist with GIF, a video, and a list of their songs. And since I submitted the same prompt to every window and I mentioned that I want a document, that's what was rendered inside each of these windows. And then again, we can navigate here to see some of the other documents that were generated. In this case, it already understood that I wanted songs. And this is how you can use parallel prompting, in this case, to create a lot of documents in parallel. And we've seen documents to showcase recipe generation or discovering things about artists, but of course, documents are very general. You can have anything that you want in your document. Okay, let's learn about the last window in WIDGENS, which also happens to be my favorite one. And this is the search window. So very often you want to learn about a new topic, but you don't know exactly what do you want. Do you want a text? What kind of text do you want? Do you want an image? Do you want a video? Do you want a list window? Do you want a chat window? Do you want a document window? It can be a bit overwhelming to think about what to ask WIDGENS. Or maybe you actually want a visual rich answer with many things at a time. And this is exactly what the search window is for. So a search window will listen to your prompt and it will answer with a rich interface that's tailored for your prompt. So it will only display the things that make sense according to your prompt. So just to see it in action, I can ask, for example, for Inception, which is a movie. And when we submit the query, it just responds with a dashboard that has a few widgets and windows. So for example, I have a text with a description of the movie, and I have the trailer that I could watch, maybe some images, and in this case, a list of similar movies to Inception. And I can ask anything else, and the response will be different. For example, I can ask for La Sagrada Familia. And notice that in this case, we're not getting exactly the same widget. So for example, we don't have the GIF, we just have the video and the image. And instead of a list, in this case, we got a document window, which of course we can prompt, we can select, we can edit. Or for example, if I ask a different question, for example, I ask for how big is the moon? In this case, it will understand that probably we don't need a video or an image to learn about this. So it just gives us a quick response. And in here, it gives us a chat window. You'll always see that on the left, we have a list of relevant widgets. And on the right, we have a relevant window, which can be a list window, a document window, or a chat window, like in this case. And just to be stubborn again, remember that general windows can render any other window inside, and search windows are no exception, which is a very useful thing to remember when parallel prompting. So just to showcase an example, I can create a list and ask for, can you make a list of 4 different optimization techniques in machine learning? So hopefully we get a list, and then I can in parallel select all of them and just type something like search, or maybe we could specify a few more details. And then I'm going to be creating search windows for every one of these general windows. And of course, we can select any that we like and we can zoom in. And of course, we can see some relevant widgets. So here we have a description, we have a document, we have an image, the video is about to be rendered. And I can also navigate to the other siblings. So now I can see stochastic gradient descent. I can see Adam optimization, which is, I guess, also relevant, and other techniques. And of course, in this case, I search for optimization techniques, but we can search for literally any concept that you're curious about. So this also opens a lot of possibilities to use WIDGENS as a learning tool. All right, so you probably realize that a very cool thing about WIDGENS is that you can use different windows for different use cases. And you can also have windows create other windows for you. And since this is very useful, we have a feature here that I'm sure you'll also find very useful, which is that we can grab any existing window and bring it either inside a chat or inside a list window. So just to showcase this, let's grab this document with a quiche recipe and bring it inside the chat. And now that it's inside the chat, of course, I can ask follow-ups. So for example, I can ask, hey, can you make a similar one but vegetarian? And since the chat window has the context of the current document, it shouldn't struggle too much to make a similar one, but in this case, vegetarian. And this is how you can grab a document and iterate on it. So that would be bringing a document into a chat, but we can also bring a document into a list, as we saw before. So let's actually turn this back into a dashboard and then bring it to a list. And in the same fashion, now notice that the document is inside the list. So for example, I can ask, hey, can you add a few more recipes to the list? I want a risotto, spinach pie, and a couple other Mediterranean recipes. And since we can prompt a list to generate more items, and the current item is a document, the list should understand that in this case, maybe we just want to generate more documents. So that's what you see it's happening right now. And of course, we can also select any of the existing documents and use the arrows here to navigate. So here we have the risotto recipe. Maybe the image doesn't make a lot of sense. We have the spinach pie recipe, and we have Mediterranean salad recipe. So, of course, in this case, we're doing recipes, but you can use this feature to extend any list of documents that you have. So this is also a very general feature. And the final feature that I wanted to showcase is that we can also grab relevant links to any of the general windows on our screen. So we can just hover over this icon, and in an instant, we will get some web results where we can also see some of the links. And we can do that regardless of what's being rendered inside the general window. So in this case, we have movies, but I can do the same thing for songs. So for example, if I want to learn more about this song, I would probably hover over here, and then I would get a list of relevant links. Or I can do the same for example, my list of groceries. And then I hover over and I see some links, which probably would bring me to a website where I just learn more about these ingredients. And we can, of course, also do this in parallel. So I can select many at a time, and pressing Command L on Mac or Control L on Windows would open 4 relevant links. In this case, one for each window on my browser.